I want to start today by letting you all know that if you are watching this on Sunday, you are tuning in on one of the preeminent religious holidays of the year. Of course, I'm talking about the Feast of Super Bowl Sunday. Obviously, I'm joking, but in reality, the Super Bowl is one of the biggest events in America every year, is also a big stage for Christians to use the time and energy and space they're provided to profess some of their beliefs and do a little bit of evangelizing. If you tune into the game tonight, you will almost certainly see people in the crowd holding up signs that say John 3:16, reminding us that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. You'll probably see many of the players on the field tonight thanking God for the biggest plays that they make, touchdowns or sacks or field goals, pointing to the sky in gratitude for the gifts that they're given. Or if you're one of the many who don't tune in for the game and are only there for the snacks and the commercials, don't worry, there's something for you too. There will be the He Gets Us ad campaign, commercials touting that Jesus feels our pain, loves us no matter who we are, and forgives us no matter what we've done. And then finally, of course, when the game is over, there will be interviews with players, and guaranteed at least one of them, probably more, will thank God for their victory from whichever team wins the game. The gospel story we have today about Simon, who of course we know becomes Peter, one of, if not Jesus's closest apostle, kind of reminds me of those Super Bowl athletes. Simon, a fisherman, is just going about his business while Jesus is teaching this huge crowd. Apparently there's people all around him pressing in on Jesus, and Jesus must be saying some pretty profound things, and there's Simon just washing his nets. We don't even know if he's listening to Jesus at this point. Jesus asks him if he can use his boat to get a bit of distance from the crowd. That's how many people there are. And even though Simon clearly allows this, we still have no indication at this point that Simon is anything but maybe curious at best. And what is most interesting about that, about how little Simon seems to be engaged at this point, is that just one chapter ago in Luke, chapter 4, Jesus goes to Simon's house and miraculously heals Simon's mother-in-law. So yet, even after that miracle, Jesus is teaching here by the lake, and you would think Simon might be doing everything he can to drink in whatever Jesus's message is, or getting forward to be near Jesus, but instead we have this image of Simon just washing his net. And then, presumably, once they get in the boat, Simon has to sit and listen to Jesus, right? Because now they're in a boat. There's no more nets to wash because they're kind of confined here. So Simon's probably just trying to steady the boat, keep it from floating too far away while he listens to Jesus. So at that point, Simon's probably listening. But where you would think that Simon would be on the edge of his seat, wanting to know what's going to happen next, when Jesus tells him to cast his net back into the water, you can almost hear the apprehension in his voice. Master, we have worked all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down my nets. Now remember, the nets are already cleaned, a process that would have taken a long time and a process that they're going to have to do again. They were probably done for the night. It's been a frustrating night, no catch, a lot of work. They're ready to go home. Jesus has already asked them to put their boat back in the water. Now he's saying, get your nets dirty again too. But then, a miracle. Simon catches fish where he hadn't found any all night. And not just a few, but a super abundance. So many that the nets were breaking and that the boats were sinking under the weight of the fish. And now, finally, Simon decides he's all in. He falls to his knees saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Notice that, where once Jesus was called Master, a term of human authority, Simon now calls him Lord. Finally, Simon gives over to Jesus as something different, something more. If you will, now is the point where Simon points to the sky in jubilation. Touchdown. You can probably hear the cynic in me, right? The cynic in me wants to think about how easy it must be for Simon to follow Jesus, at least in Luke's telling, right? It's a little bit different in the other Gospels, but in Luke, Simon gets not one, but 2 miracles, and not to mention a front row seat sitting next to Jesus in a boat while he preaches, and then he decides to follow Jesus. How easy it must be to follow Jesus when you've witnessed all that firsthand. You know, the cynic in me also wants to look at all of the displays that we'll see, the displays of faith that we'll see on TV tonight, and scoff. I want to say, of course you'll point to God when you score a touchdown, or of course you'll use a small percentage of your billions of dollars to make yourself feel better about what you do in your secular life by putting some Christian commercials on TV. How easy must it be to follow Jesus or point back to God when you have otherworldly athletic ability or billions of dollars of cash to spend as you please? You all get to sit on your piles of cash, pointing to the sky, while many of us feel outright abandoned by God often in our mundane lives. How easy is it to point to God when things go well, when we win? Where is our miracle to compel us to follow Jesus? In fact, whether it is Simon Peter falling at the knees of Jesus or Patrick Mahomes pointing to the sky after a touchdown pass, if you want to be a cynic about these kinds of things, it is really easy. And if we focus on the miracles here, the abundant fish or the incredible athletic ability or the billions of dollars made in business, if we focus on the miracles, it's nearly impossible to not be cynical. But if you can see through the miracles, through the miracle of the fish, see past the touchdowns or the sacks or the interceptions, if you can see past the wins in these stories, we might see the beauty that is messy people recognizing the divine. Because the stark reality is that everyone who participates in Super Bowl evangelism tonight, it would be much easier for all of those people if they just didn't. It would be way simpler to hold up signs that live into the secularization of the day that just have your favorite players' names on them. It would be far easier to spend the money on the commercials that pump up your investments rather than spread the news of Jesus getting us. It'd be way more accepted for players to point to the name on the back of their jersey rather than to the sky. All of these people could avoid a quite fair disapproval of things like John 3:16 signs being said that they might downplay or even delegitimize other religions by implying that Christianity is the only way to God. These people could steer clear of the very true criticism from both sides of the aisle that pick through the theology of the He Gets Us commercials and the organization that foots the bill for them. The players could circumvent the condemnation that many of them face because they point to the sky on the field, but don't live very Christian lives off of it. They could take the cynicism out of our hands and avoid all of that ridicule. Yet, they choose to use the stage they've been given, despite all the critics, myself included, who might be watching, to take a moment to recognize the presence of a divine other. Maybe the entire point is that none of this is perfect. In the gospel today, Jesus doesn't ask anyone perfect to follow him. He doesn't ask anyone that might be seen as perfect. He doesn't ask religious leaders or the wealthy or the pious. He asks the fishermen, one of whom at least we know professes to be a sinner. And what's more, he doesn't ask them to do anything other than what they were already equipped to do. He asks them to fish. The miracle on display is just fishing. Then he asks them to follow him and to catch. When he says, from now on, you will be catching people, I don't think he's just using a clever pun here. I think he's asking the fishermen to be fishermen. He's saying, do what you always do, but do it in a way that recognizes the divine in your midst. And we know that it isn't perfect. These very fishermen give Jesus all kinds of grief throughout the rest of the gospel with all of their questions and their short-sightedness and their inability to understand, right? Peter himself abandons Jesus at the cross when he swears he won't. Jesus asked the fishermen to fish, despite their imperfections. And maybe he asks all these people involved in the Super Bowl to just be themselves, the players to play, even though they aren't perfect. And maybe he's asking me to preach, even when I'm boring. And maybe he's asking you to lawyer, or to account, or to operate, or to organize, or to data analyze, even when you are exhausted. Or maybe he's asking us to raise our kids, or support our friends, or care for our aging parents, even when we're angry at God. To do all of those things that we are already equipped to do, but just to do that same thing in a way that recognizes the divine in our midst. And certainly that could mean that every time you turn in a report or hold the door for a stranger or get your kid down for a nap, you could do a little dance and point to the sky in jubilation and gratitude. Certainly you could recognize the divine in that way. Or maybe it might mean just doing the job that you're already equipped to do, but to do it in a way where you can truly and deeply know that it is the way that Christ would call you to do it. To recognize the presence of the divine in everything that you do, no matter how mundane. We may not be called to win a Super Bowl, but Simon, James, and John were not called to be anything other than what they were either. Yet they were still called to follow Christ. So let's go be ourselves. But let's make sure we recognize the presence of the divine other and point back to God while we're doing it.